All right, then without further ado, it's a huge privilege to introduce Dr. Chris Lodewyk. It is a privilege. It is a privilege. And I must say, in a sense, I'm a bit biased because I know him personally. It's a huge privilege for several reasons. He's part of a golden generation that did incredible work in this country from an incredibly difficult situation leading up to 1994. And there's so much we can learn from him. He's been actively involved in various reconciliation efforts across the globe, not just South Africa, but actively involved with it, actively involved with TRC. And he's a larger-than-life figure in this country, but also in Cape Town. He's born and bred Cape Townian, and it's such a huge privilege to have him with us. His fiancée is also with us tonight, so it's a huge privilege to have him. He's a busy man. He's a man that is all over the place. I think it was about 2 years ago, I happened to be in London in the UK, and lo and behold, he was in London in the UK as well. So he's a man that moves around quite a bit, a busy man, but a man with a true heart for this country and for people. And he's got a unique story that I think we can truly learn about. And the idea is that he tonight shares his story and his experience, but also what he's learned in the process concerning that. So please do give him a huge hand, and let's welcome him.
Good evening. With an introduction like that, you get nervous no matter how long you've been around. Thank you so much for having me. Great privilege and an honor, and to be amongst you learned friends. And I do trust that when the questions come, you will not make it too difficult for me. And I hope you haven't brought any stones in here to stone me if I say something that you don't like. But thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege, it's a pleasure being here. I always say any excuse to come to Cape Town. I love it. I live in Johannesburg. Don't you say sympathy? But any excuse to come to Cape, it's a lovely place. I get here about at least 10 times a year or 12 times a year and enjoy every moment. Why? Because it holds such dear, painful at times, memories of Cape Town. It's where I was born, right here in Cape Town. And now I happen to be living in Johannesburg and lived all over, lived in Germany, England, but I came back. This is still the best place to be. My fiancé, as you heard, you're probably looking and say, hey, he must be 120 already. What's he doing with the fiancé? No, yes, I am older. Not old, just older. But I have been somebody that walked alone and had about almost 5 years of aloneness after my late wife died after 54 years of marriage. And she is also a widow and has also had a good life with a husband who also passed away. And we just happened to run into one another along the lake while we were walking. No, I got to know about 14, 15 years ago, and somehow it happened, and we're getting married within 3 weeks' time. So, so I feel like a human again, you know, it's been good. I am a father and a grandfather and also a great-grandfather. And in another 2 months' time or 3 months' time, she'll also be a great-grandmother. That makes me feel good, you know. But thank you so much for having me. My life in Cape Town has been an interesting one. It's one that have caused me much tears and pain, and it's also one that has given me tremendous joys over the years. I was born in a place called Heathfield, which you probably all know, just under the Constantia Mountains there by Bergfleet, and lived there for a number of years until I was about maybe 8 7, 8, 9 years old. But we didn't live there for too long. Parents lived there for long, but once the children were born and I was the second eldest, then problems began to arise, because it was, even before it was fully declared and officially become a white area on this side of the railway line, we were placed on the outside, on the sidewalk, losing our house because we're living in a group area that will now be declared to be not for colored people. And my mother, who was classified white, and my father, from a German descent, a colored. So we had to go, and that was the first blow that we got. And we managed somehow to survive a night on the road, and then somebody very kind enough decided that they can let the horses run outside in the field and give us the stable to live in. And so we moved into the stable, my mom, my dad, and 6 children. And we lived in the stable for something like 5 years before alternative accommodation came up. But two things made me a very angry young man. And one was the fact that we were on the street, put out of our house. And the second one is that my mom got before email and Twitter and everything, she got a telegram. I don't know how many of you know what a telegram is, but okay, that was what she got, a telegram that said her father had passed away. He was a farmer out in Klapmuts from Holland, and he said he passed away, and they said to announce that to her. But what they kindly asked and politely asked is that she and her family not attend the funeral, because we might be an embarrassment to his new family. So I saw my mom, his only daughter, crying with a telegram in the hand, and when she gave me the telegram, I looked at the telegram and she just walked away. Now what that did to me that day, by then I was, I think, 13, almost 14 years old, but I understood a few things and became a very, very angry young man. Extremely angry young man. To the extent that it grew that I, please forgive me for saying this, hated every single white person on earth. I could not understand what had happened. And I grew up with that. Very polite, never rude, but very politely, you know, hating people. I don't want to go into a long story of how it all changed. It did change. And now I'm so shocked to find that 75% of my friends happen to be a little bit lighter than me. But that's in the history. During that time of all that has happened and that life that I've gone through, and I haven't got all the time to tell you how it all changed later, I want to say this to you, that I have very often loved and worked. I was working in this post office here when I was simply 14 years old. And working there with telegrams to the liners that came in to bring all the messages and everything from England that came in. So this place to me, District 6 and Cape Town, is a familiar place. I have many a times, I've never lived there, but I walked there, I had friends there. So District 6 was a place that I could wander. Yes, there were quite a number of gangs there, but I have never known such respectable gangsters. Because they would even be polite if you go past, you know. And their fights was more with the opposing gang than with the guy that passes. So I walked there, go to the bioscope that was there, and came to, you know, visit family there, and I was very happy. I loved District 6. And then came the Big Bang, when District 6 people had to be removed. It was a tough thing. And although I didn't live there, I felt the pain of it because there were some relatives of mine that were living there, and I many weekends, spent weekends there, stayed there. Happy people, enjoying it very, very much. But they happened to be too close to town, and they were put out. And as you know, they were shifted, you know the history, to all over. There's Menenberg, there's different places like that. What's the one out there in near Retreat? All of them now are very dangerous areas that have become. Now, while they had gangsters here, they have gangsters there, but not nearly the way it is now in all of these places. Why? Because these people came from different areas, and there were different gangs, not sort of friendly gangsters that lived up here, mostly, you know, making sure that they place their peg, this is my territory, and respect this area, and then you are safe. There it is kill me quick. And so you find that, and often I ask myself, would it have been the same if those people were not removed? If I think of all the deaths, I haven't got the stats of all the people that have died in the retreat area, in the areas of Menenberg and all of those places that have become areas that, you know, the parents can't just have their children in the street because of the killings and all of the things that happen there. And sometimes I ask myself the question, would that have been like that if people were not removed from District 6? Maybe their children could have gone to another area. But there was hardly an area which was called a colored area that was really safe after that. Yes, it was not as dangerous as it is now, but it was relatively safe to still go in there. But then, when the enmity between the gangs developed within those places, probably 6, 7 places like that, that can be mentioned, it was totally a different situation. Because it's now a new area, new opponents, new enemies, and all that you find in different areas. And all of those areas became very dangerous areas. Some of the people that lived in District 6 and in areas like Heathfield, like Wynberg, and all of those places where we lived changed drastically once this side of the railway line was moved out. I think it definitely brought about a barrier that was raised between the population groups even before the liberation came. There was already the hatred when the moving over was happening. I remember as I grew up and moved to the other side of the line, my wife and I had our first child, and the child was born at a clinic somewhere here in Cape Town. And by that time, I would finish at 5 o'clock and then wait and sit at a little restaurant that was here in Cape Town, only one that a colored or black person could go in. So for that time that my wife was in hospital for probably at least for 3 to 4 weeks, I would be there every night. And there was one thing on the menu, a pie and mashed potatoes. And so my dinner for those 3 weeks was pie and mashed potatoes, because there was no alternative. It was just there. It is amazing how, to some extent, you accept certain things. But later on, with all that has happened inside, later it grows because you have no answers for it. And all your answers that you do have for yourself are answers that makes you bitter. It is tragic, it is sad that has happened. And I don't want to talk too much about what has happened there. I want to talk about how can we get to where we were, to where we need to be. How do we somehow try? We cannot turn back the clock. It's done, it's finished. But how can we somehow do something towards getting us back from where we are on a journey, because it's no leap to where we need to be, but how can we get into a journey that will take us to a better place than we are now? What we are finding now is that we had an era that when Mandela was there, and there was now a new order, and it seems, oh my, everything is changing. Mandela is the most precious person and is winning people over. And it just seemed as if everything is going to be, how do they call it, hunky-dory? Everything is going to be fine from now, because we got the best man that God could ever have given us, Mandela. And what a man. I had the pleasure of working with him. An absolute giant, but also a wonderful man. He was there for 4 years, and then time went on. And then we, as people in different groupings, sort of felt it's all now okay. We don't have to worry. You know, things will disappear. Mandela's there. Now that Mandela's there, it's all going to be okay, you know. But it doesn't work like that. I think our problem, my view is that we did not properly deal with the situation. We neglected to deal with the underlying things that there were, with the result that the moment the Mandela magic was off, it rises again to the top, like it is rising even now, because we have not dealt with it. And I believe that we who are here and who love this country, and I love this country dearly. I lived in England, I lived in Germany, and my fiancée is American, and okay, she's, I was almost going to say she's a friend of Donald Trump, but I'm not going there. But she's from the States, and I'm, for the past 30, 40 years, I'm to and fro, it's my second home. But this is the place I come home to. It's the place I want to be. And every day I try to find how can I make the smallest possible contribution so that that which has raised from the top, whatever has risen from what was, that suddenly it faces us. What can we do? And I believe that every person that loves South Africa must ask themselves, how and where can I make a contribution, not to favor anybody, but merely to find out how can I be a peacemaker. Now, if you're saying to me, Chris, you talk about difficult things and talk about impossibilities, I don't believe that. I've had the awesome pleasure with working on the reconciliation in Northern Ireland. During their time, I've seen things happen. I worked in the Rwanda after the genocide and worked there, chaired the reconciliation. I saw miracles, so I know miracles does exist. I worked in Australia with the Aborigine, a problem in Australia. I saw the Aussies, that even there things can change. We need to somehow become more determined to say, instead of my criticizing, instead of my reading the newspaper, which I read every single day, I want to know what's happening. Some people don't want to read it. They say, no. I don't want to see any more bad news. Now, I don't miss a newspaper. I want to see what's real here. I make my own opinions and decisions on it, but I want to know how late it is. I want to know how bad it is, and so that I can in some way or another, try to make a contribution. I would say to you that there is that possibility that we can move from where we find ourselves to where there's a better place for all of us. I'm not saying we must roll back the clock. We are, 23 years old as a nation, which means we are youngsters. Which also says that, we haven't gone a century and it's too late to turn back. I believe we can. And what we have to do, I believe, one of the things is for more people to get engaged, to make a contribution and see where they can make a contribution. And if we find a spot that we feel, this is where I can make a contribution, this is what I'm good at, this is where I have a gift for that I can do, I believe that that gift must be employed so that we can have, for all of us, to save this beautiful country. I still believe that we have a great opportunity. I still believe that it's the country that I want to be in. I still believe that I don't want to be anywhere else. One of the first things I said to Lorena, I said, are you ready to come and live in Africa now? She's almost an African already. Just in 5 weeks that she's here. And I just believe that this country has so much to offer. And all of us that look and read and complain and say and criticize, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we sometimes have to do that. But how about all of us trying to find where, how, and what do I have to contribute towards making this a better country? Now, I haven't got the time to tell you of my life. I sort of just stopped there, and I meant to do that. If I, after what happened to me, my mom, my dad, my sisters, my brothers, decided, okay, that's it. I will just simply try to be nice, but, I will go on hating as much as I can. And I have no education, so I'll just go on. But I thank God that I made the decision, I'm not going to be a loser. Hear me, I determined I will not be a loser. I will not that what happened robbed me from where I could be and what I could be. I never believed that I'll be something great, and I ain't. But I knew that I am better than working in the post office at 14 and going nowhere fast. But I can tell you this determination of our young people to determine, I will make it. Now, some of you look like educated people, so I maybe don't need to talk to you about climbing the ladder. But I'm talking about our people within the areas that are struggling, that are fighting, that have had nothing, and they have given up because they believe that the new system did not benefit them at all. What I believe that we who are educated, who are better off, who have a privilege, should guide and lead and help others out of where they are to get to where they can be. And I've repeated that a few times. I wouldn't say that if I don't believe that I am a humble example of that. Because I had almost no education when I was thrown out of school. Because I had nothing. I couldn't even get through anywhere. And at 14, go work. But at every place that I have come, I have determined I will be a winner. I will win. And my first job after the post office was actually a promotion into Cape Town Public Gardens. And I had a tremendous position there. I was a gardener. With the elderly men, I was with pick and shovel in that gardens. And after pick and shoveling for about a few months, I heard my German leader, that was the horticulturist, come in there, and he said to somebody, I got to get somebody in the office here. And I went to him and I said, sir, I can do it for you. He says, can you do it? I said, yes, I can do it, sir. And he put me in the office and he showed me the books and he showed me everything. And when he showed it to me and he walked out and I looked at it, I said, oh my, what have I done? I know nothing about anything here. And I tried to fix some things there. And later he came in the next day and he says, what have you done? You told me you can do it. I said, sir, I said I can do it because I so much wanted to do it. All I need is a chance. I'm just looking for a chance. And I will do it. I believe I can do it. Just give me a chance. And he looked at me and he swore about a half a dozen words there, and which I won't repeat here. And then he said, oh, seeing that you're now here, just get on to there and do it. And I went in and I tried to fix some. Long story short, within about a year and a half, I was driving around Cape Town with a municipal van and 114 men under me for the beautification of Cape Town. And that was my responsibility, every morning coming in and making sure that the mayor's parlor and all of those places are well set, and the beautification in Cape Town was a bit more beautiful than it is now because things were growing and they had rain at that time. And when I did that, I felt good. I felt I can make it. I don't need to stay in the mud. I can make it. And eventually I served there for a few years, short years, and then I head off to the harbor, and they were building the new tanker basins coming in there. And I went in there and I asked for a job, and once again I went for something that I did not qualify. And it wasn't long that I was driving the big machines in there and building that new tanker basins that's now there. And here's the last little story before I give the impression that I got somewhere. When I saw that, I saw an ad in the newspaper that WJM Construction, who knows WJM Construction? You've heard of them, okay. WJM Construction is looking for a senior sites clerk with knowledge of the industry that they are in. And I decided, okay, I'm going to apply for that job. And I went there to where the office was, and I got in there, and there were 9 people sitting there. No, I was the 9th one, and I sat down there. They went each one had his portfolio, and I had nothing. And after I was called into the office by a tall what was Zimbabwe before? Rhodesia. A tall Rhodesian called me into the office and he said, now what are you doing here? I said, sir, I'm come for the job. He says, but where's your... I said, I got nothing, sir, but I'm just looking for this job. I want this job. He says, it doesn't work like that. These people are qualified. You are not. I said, sir, all I need is just a chance in life. And he says, it doesn't work like that. I said, sir, it can work like that. You know? And we had a little bit of a conversation, and at the end he said to me, tell me, why am I still talking to you here? I said, sir, I am only asking for a chance in life. And I promise you, Mr. Faber, I will make you proud of me. And he looked at me and he says, what are you talking about? I said, just that, sir. I want this job so much, and I believe I can do it. And then when I get this job, I will make you proud of me. He looked at me and he says, why am I doing this? I said, because it's the right thing, sir. And he told us that the receptionist, please tell them that the job is taken. And when the engineer took me to the first elevated reservoir, and he says, okay, there's your office. You and the engineer in charge of this site. I said, okay, sir, that's fine. And there I was, once again, just starting. A daredevil, call it that. It was a week later that he came back, and the engineer came back and he said to me, "How's it going?" I said, "Sir, for about a third of the day it goes well." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, there's hard work for about a third of a day, and the rest of the day I actually have quite a nice soft job. I can sit around." He says, "Come with me." And he drove me to Hout Bay. And he says, "Here we're extending this harbor. Can you run this job?" I said, "I think I can, sir." "Can you run it too?" I said, "Yes, I can, sir." And he left me there. And when he came back another week later, he came in and he said, "Are you satisfied now, sir?" I said, "Very close, sir. I'm almost satisfied." And he says, "You glutton for punishment?" I said, "No, sir. I promise Mr. Faber I'll make him proud of me. And I want to succeed." He says, "Get in the car." And he drove me to the airport, which was still the old airport. I can't remember what the name was. But old airport here in Cape Town. And he says, "We're extending the runway. Can you run this one and the other two?" I said, "I can, sir." And he says, "Okay, this we want finished in 6 months." I think it was 8 months. And long story short, within 6.5 months, I finished the job there. And I came back. And when I came back, and I say this very humbly, it wasn't a few months after that, I was called into the office. And when I called into the office, I walked into the same office there where Mr. Faber was sitting. He's retired. And I walked in there as the manager of WJM Construction. From nothing, with determination, you can get somewhere. That's what we have to instill into people that have missed out because of the situation that existed. Manenberg is full of it, and so many other places. If we can inspire them, and I try to do that in some areas, inspire them, all is not lost. All is not lost. You can do that. And inspire them with a belief that they can make it. All is not over, all is not lost. I like the idea that has happened here in Goodwood. There was a church there that had some of the people go and pair up with people in the Black Township. Forgot the name what it is, the big one. Khayelitsha. And they paired up there with one of the guys from there, call him from the haves, together pairing up with the have-nots. And the result was absolutely staggering. It went well. They did it. It was the Dutch Reformed Church that did it. They did an immense job. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that we got to do what we can to either guide people so that they can recover to a measure what they have lost. Now, the people that lost at that time, you can't, most of them, many of them has already passed on, they have died. But those who are their children now and grandchildren, they still bear that mark and also bear the regrets of the past, and they will tell the old stories. And why do they tell the old stories? Because there's no new stories to tell. And if we can create new stories to be told, the more we create new stories, the less the old stories will be told. As long as we say, well, that is it, let's leave it there, and we just hope they come right. I believe, I am a Christian, but I believe God helps those who help themselves. And we got to get people to be ready to help themselves, but we got to be the inspiration. And we got to get them to a place where they're ready to say, okay, I can and I will. I think that is important. I was blessed to later somehow recover or make up for the years that I have lost. Studied for years to make up for what I have lost. I had the opportunity to do that. Now, I have my children. I have my grandchildren. I look at them and I see where they are now and what they are doing. Then I feel proud as that little boy who walked out, thrown out, out of your house, living there in the stable. I get into the aeroplane. Often when I fly and I get into the plane, and when I SAA, and when we leave the airport, and I hear the announcement there, gentlemen at the control say, this is your Senior First Officer Chris Lodewyk speaking, then I feel proud that my son could be there. He could not get a job like that. He has it now. But I could encourage him, get him where I could not get. I can't get a job like that. But otherwise you won't fly SAA. But I can make room for him. And so I've gone on with all of the others. I challenged them. I said, I will regard myself as a failure if you don't go beyond me, because you have better chance in life than I had. And today they accept my challenge. And I am proud to be doing that. My sister came to visit us in Johannesburg 2 weeks ago, and she said to me, Chris, I said, yes. She says, do you know of how many direct family, you are the, what they call it, a matron? Yeah, something like that, okay. And I said, no, and she said, 124. 124. I know I don't look that. I know I look like 27. But when I see them, where they have come, then I'm extremely happy. Not because of who I am, but that we did not give up, but said, okay, what we couldn't do, we're going to get our children to do it. Now, not everybody has that privilege unless we connect them to that privilege by saying, okay, where is it? Is it somebody that's working for me in my office? Is it somebody that's working for me in my house that I can be and say, okay, good morning, have you a son at home, a daughter at home? How can I meet him? What can I do? If all of us try to do something to make reparation for some of the things that happen, not everything, but some of the things, I believe we can be a better country. I believe we can go far. We won't conquer it all, but we can conquer some, because it's possible. You know, one thing that I still love in this country and why I have faith, there's still a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of goodwill. Now you have the goodwill on the one side, and on the other side, you have those that have gone just about, you know, had it that far. They've had enough. Nothing works anymore. If I can't get further than this, then I'll burn this off, and I can burn that off. The frustration is there. Once again, coming back to say, because some things that we could have done, we have not done. And what it is, have some things were simmering underneath. And now that we're in a season that's not too good, we see all of that coming out, the bitterness, the hate, and such. Just before I finish, I must assure you that I'm not that hater of a certain color of people anymore. That's long gone, about 40 years ago. And as I said, I have, you know, surprisingly, not purposely, I'm surprised. I just woke up to it, that I have more white friends than I have black friends. It wouldn't have happened 25, 30 years ago. But it did happen. And now, because my life has changed, and I did not accept failure. And when the state decided to make me what I ain't, I tried to rise above that and not be determined not to be a failure. I think we got a job, that are in a better spot. We got a job to encourage people to believe more and to believe that they can. I think there's a foundation down here somewhere, the I Can Foundation. Or is it in Johannesburg somewhere? It's not a bad name. I think we can. And I saw somewhere here the Let's Talk. I love that. I commend you for that title, because that is where it begins, talking. talking to one another. And I'm privileged to just chat to you this morning. I didn't do a prepared speech. I made half a dozen or so notes or so, but I just wanted to talk to you from my heart. Because the stories that I can tell that I read from the newspaper, that's one. But the stories that I can tell out of my own life means more, because I am proof of it. It's not that I read it. And that is why I want to encourage you, and I'd be happy to answer questions, but I want to encourage you to ask yourself, I want to see things change. Yes, all of us say that, or feel that, or think that. How can I help? What can I do to change somebody's attitude or lifestyle or life so that there be room for all of us in this beautiful country? And it is a beautiful country. It's a wonderful country. We must not let it go to the dogs. God bless you.
If I can maybe quickly give a personal reflection on what you said and what I heard, and then we can proceed to the Q&A. I think you were very gracious to us here tonight. You know, the stark realities of what you went through as a child, family, as a young man, as a father. That's very harsh. It is harsh realities you went through. And I think you were very gracious to us in how you described it. And I think it's very clear your heart for reconciliation and moving forward. But I think for me, what really stood out to me as I was just listening and reflecting through what you were saying, I think somebody like me, I underestimate the opportunities that I've had all these years and how much easier it is for me to get to a certain level, a certain sort of work. Not because I'm better, not because I'm more talented, but just simply because I had the opportunities. And I think that forces me to reconsider somebody else and realize that I don't have those opportunities. And the way in which I approach them is actually really critical. And what I do for them in terms of that is really critical. So that's one thought that I had. The other thought that I had was, I loved what you said about the need for creating new stories. And I think we all, to some extent, a ghost of the old stories. And I think for 1994, there was such a big change that happened in this country, and people hold on to that story. But it's interesting to me, just listening to what a lot of people are saying, that story is becoming stale to some extent. And I think there's desperately a need to create new stories, but then they have to be created. That we don't inherit them, we have to create them. And we're all part and parcel of that solution. So I really appreciate that as well. And I think the last thing that really stood out for me is that there's a huge need for dignity. And I think the way in which you addressed it was talking about your determination. The way that you were placed in society arbitrarily and unfairly and unjustly and in an evil way, so that would not determine who you are. There's a real need for dignity, but it came from within yourself in a certain sense. And that we should never forget that tremendous need for dignity in South Africa that every human being certainly wants. We've had great questions already, so please do forward some more questions so we can ask them. The first question that we have is just simply the question you mentioned that as a young man you were angry, and quite rightly so. If one of us would be able to address you in that moment, what could we have said or done to help that anger? Because we're dealing with a disenfranchised youth today in South Africa, angry, disenfranchised youth. And what can be said and what can be done? And I think you alluded to some things, but what would help in that moment? Help us understand that a bit more. Not just what can we say, what can we do, how can we address it, each one of us in a certain sense for, yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think we need to be careful not to go into some of the people that needs the help. by going in there as if we have all the answers. I think our approach must be in the form of a question and asking, what is there that I can do to help you? I would like to help you. Help me to help you. One of the problems that we sometimes have is we go in there almost with giving the impression, tell me what I can do for you because I can do it all. You're not saying it, but you're saying, sit down, let me talk to you about it. Listen, you mustn't do this. You must do this. You must try this. That must not be the departure point. And many make the mistake by making that the departure point, whereas instead saying, listen, I'm just here. I want to hear. I'd like you to talk to me. What is it that pains you? What is it that hurts you? What is it that you feel, stops you from attaining and obtaining what you really can? If you give a person that kind of opportunity to just open himself or herself to you by saying, well, thank you so much, my problem is, then you have been given access to that person who have actually opened the door to tell you. Even today, that wherever I go, I always try my best to, when I see there's something that I perhaps can assist, I will always go with a kind of question where I say, good morning, how are you doing today? You know, and let the conversation lead with more questions and not you giving answers before you have learned what the question is. Now, some of us think when we have somebody from the township, you know what the questions are. You know. So you're going to give him a few answers and a few lessons and a few words. It is better to approach as a willing person to learn that person say, this is where you can help me. And I think with that approach, you open a door for people. When I came into a situation and growing up, there was nobody that was stopping me and says, Chris, man, you got a bit potential, man. Is there something I can do to help you to get where you need to be? There was nothing of the kind. And I think the time that we're in now, we need to change some of the attitudes where we know it all. You read in the newspapers and you knew how these people lived, so I got the answers. Come and sit down, let me talk to you. It's not the way to go. The way is the approach. It's almost as if, and in truth, it's the truth, because really you and I don't really know what the problem is and how painful it is and what the person is struggling with. But we try to give an answer before there is a question. So my simple advice is to make a friend by asking, tell me, how can I help you? What can I do to make your pain a little bit easier? I think in that way, we create access for making a suggestion. Most times you find people make suggestions without even having created access to speak into a person's life.
Thanks. The next question we have here, and please do keep on coming over questions. We actually have a lot of questions around the TRC reconciliation. I think there's a lot of people these days that's saying, but you know what, the TRC, when everything is said and done, it was actually a failure. Whether you agree with that or not, obviously you're welcome to say, but that's certainly the notion that one is hearing more and more out there. But coming back to the question, I think a lot of people are asking here, you know, just in terms of your experience, you've been now in different sort of contexts internationally and looking at how, you know, people try to get to a place of reconciliation again between racial groups and even religious strife, Northern Ireland, socioeconomic. Haven't seen all of that, having learned all of that. What perhaps would you have changed, if I can put it that way, or added, or how could we have grown a bit further, or what lessons have you derived from all of that to facilitate true reconciliation on a much deeper level? I guess this is a bit more of a higher abstract level question, looking at social groups, but there is some questions coming more on the sort of personal level. What can a person do? But I do think this is quite a hot topic out there. So your thoughts and lessons that you've learned.
Let me start by saying I believe that attempts with reconciliation, it does work. I've seen it work. About 3 months ago, I was in Seychelles. Now, many of you may have a holiday home there, and you go often to Seychelles. It's the holiday paradise. It really, it looks such a beautiful, and it is a beautiful. Who's been to Seychelles already? Oh yeah, look at there, all the hands there. Okay, it is a beautiful place, and there is, some of you may know, there's a big place that is the little South. It's not so little, but it's called the Little South Africa. The most beautiful homes in Seychelles are South African holiday homes. And it's actually reclaimed land into the ocean, and beautiful estate with everything, absolutely beautiful. If I knew the question was going to come up, I would have brought a brochure with, and you know, and it looked so beautiful. And I also thought, so I must go to holiday there one time. Maybe we can go for honeymoon there when we get married. But when I was there, I was asked to come over and be part of a panel that was, and we were 8 people in the panel, including the president, the vice president of the country, and they're all there, and talking about getting past their problem, which you don't see in the surface on the surface when you get there. In 1978, they had a coup. Some call it a coup, others call it a revolution, and they've never dealt with it. Never dealt with it. Now you have the perpetrators and you have the victims, and there sits in this beautiful place, auditorium, there's 650 people. The victims are there, the perpetrators are there, and here we are as a panel of 8 addressing them. So I'm sitting next to the guy who's a lovely guy, just a beautiful guy, and he's guiding, he's the chairman there, and I saw when the people began to come up with the questions after all the speeches, he began to get nervous. And I said to him, don't worry, this is a very good sign. He says, what do you mean? I said, let people talk. And he says, okay, and people talk, and the questions come, and the answers. And later on, it gets a bit hard. Those who are on the one side wants, you know, things must be done. My dad was in there. My parents was there. I need to be compensated now. And the other side is the perpetrators saying that it's past. We must forgive, you know. And now you have all this. And the nervousness sets in there. And I said, guys, just be calm. You have allowed all of these years to come along. And now that you give people a chance for the first time, in all of these years you gave people a chance to talk, you can't be scared now. Let them talk. And it went on until about almost 11 o'clock the evening. And I said, we must arrange another session for the people to come and let them come and talk some more. I'm saying all that to say, people that in reconciliation, we must give people space to talk. Even if there's some hatred, let it be said, let it be heard, and don't get angry about it. And let people, the more people talk, the more feel they are letting steam off and feeling more calm. Now, they're going on with the TRC. They're going to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And because they have felt that in South Africa, I want you to know South Africa is not the only, there were over 41 Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in the world. And the big testing of it all was that in all of them, almost, there is more what would you say, more gain than it not being done. In our particular case, if you want my simple, humble judgment, I believe it has done something. But I also believe it's not done enough. It's not done enough. It has done something. I believe we would have been further back. We had to do that before we can move forward, even if it's not perfect. It needed to be done at that time. Those people that came there that were victims, they needed to be heard. Those people that did confess, they needed to be heard and be helped. Did it completely solve the problem? Definitely not. Far from it. But I promise you, it would have been worse if we did not. Wherever it has happened, and I say again to you that I had the privilege of chairing not the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but the forum, because the United Nations did the official big one from United Nations. And I know what it meant in Rwanda. Today, Rwanda is the most stable and the most advanced as going forward in the whole of Africa. It's the safest. They're going forward. Wherever did you get 91% of the population asking for the president to stand for a third time? Nowhere else. Some we want out ahead of time. But I'm not referring to anybody particular, okay, Yolanda, okay. But that's the fact. Where people have an opportunity of talking, we got to allow them to do it. And that's why I say that, for me, reconciliation worked. I can tell you stories of Northern Ireland. I can tell you stories of the Aborigines in Australia, where we sat down for hours and what. And I tell you, without that, we would be further back. I'm not saying it's going to solve all the problems, but it will take us forward and not backward.
I think the next question sort of really ties in closely to that. This person has sent the message a couple of times, so if I don't ask it, I'm afraid there will be somebody with a baseball bat outside here waiting for me. So I want to make sure that I want to ask a question, or I should ask a question. The person noticed that in Rwanda there was actually compulsory reconciliation sessions, and that it was held in different districts, and people had to. They were almost forced in a certain sense, I guess, what compulsory means, that they had to talk about these things. Force is now maybe a strong word. I shouldn't become a politician. But the question is, how would that be possible here? How do we start talking interracially? And I think that then boils down to the more sort of personal side of things. That there's a real need, not just on a larger social community level, but on a personal level. How do we start these sort of conversations, and what's the best way of doing it, and yeah, taking that a bit further in your opinion?
Yeah, our problem is huge. Our problem is huge, and there's no one answer. Just to quickly mention Rwanda. Rwanda had two parts of it. Rwanda had they said they don't want a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because the truth is evident. They want a Reconciliation Commission. There were two sides. There was the one that there were 6 of us from South Africa. I think 2 of them from Pretoria University and 1 or 2 from Cape Town that were there from the South African side. But the biggest one was the United Nations one, but that one was held across the border. And it lasted for, I think, about 2, if more than 2 years probably it lasted. But what I can say, there is no doubt in my mind that all of those events that were held there, it worked. 10 years later, they were gathering at the big, big stadium, and they could celebrate truly victoriously. And you can look at the stats of Rwanda now. It's different after all that hate. They still have a problem outside their borders because some has fled outside into the Congo and places like that. That does exist. But I am still convinced that they would not have come as far as they are now have they not at least done that. Now, coming back to the major question asked by the professor here, that what can we do? There's no single answer because our situation all over differs. Each organization, church group, whatever it is, must find what is possible within their vicinity and what is possible in not having meetings of thousands and then talking there and preaching there. I'm talking about interaction. Interaction with people about why do we have to go to, or why do we have this, what is happening now? That people are impatient. If they ask for something, whether it's at the schools or anything like that, if they haven't got it that day, they burn it tomorrow. If they have a strike for the taxis and they can't get the rent, burn a few taxis down or buses down. And it happens all the... Why is it happening? It's an anger that is there. I'm not approving of it. I'm not saying it's the right thing. It definitely is not. But you've got to ask the question, why is that there? Why is nothing done? And the thing is, some of them has found that they have asked and it wasn't given, and then they decide to do that and it works. And when you see something that works, you're going to do that again next time for it to work. I am praying that we would come to the place that people don't have to burn something down to be heard. Excuse me. But that they are being heard before the anger overflows. And that's why I talk about communication. That's why I talk about you and I being available to wherever we can. And listen, you remember that old story, simple little example that the guy came along on the beach and then he walked there and I saw a guy taking the, what was it, the little thing that crawls over the sand. A crab or something into the water, and he says, now, why did you do that? It's only him and the others have all that. He says, that one will live. He says, that one. Yeah, but why do you throw that one in the water? It's only one and the others has been eaten up. No, he says, that one will not be eaten up. He's living. We're thinking of our community so big. How do we help the world? We can't help the world. We got to help the person in the world that is the closest to us. So that we can say, if they say, look, the others are still burning, that one won't burn down. We got to find that one that we can save, that we can say, no, that person will be. And I have seen it, I know it, it works. People trust when you give them an opportunity to talk and make them sit and they feel a human being. Instead of, hey, kom eens op, sit daar. And now you're going to tell him what's all the rights because you know all that is right and he knows nothing. Handle people like they feel they're being respected. Handle people as if you're telling them you're worthy. I want to talk to you. How about having a coffee with me? Me? Yes, man. I want to have a coffee with you. And you said that. Immediately you have said to that person, oh my, he thinks I'm somebody. And all that a person needs is to get a bit of confidence that he truly is not a castaway. He's not a lower class. He is equal to The shade may be a little bit different, but what does the shade make? You can just put paint on and paint it. Otherwise, it's just a color. It's just a color. It's sad that over the last few months and years, suddenly the race thing has come up so strong. We were thinking that we're slowly getting out of it and we're all walking together. But I say it again, we didn't deal with it. And now it's tougher to deal with, but not impossible. It's just that we got a bigger job now. That we got to try harder and get those people that are angry because, you know, you and I have a life. We can easily say we're going home tonight. But most of those people, they have nothing to be proud about. So they don't care whether, you know, a prison or whatever it may be. So what? You know, it's actually, I'm losing nothing if I lose my life. I'm losing nothing if I am taken to prison. It's nothing, fine. You and I feel that we have something to live for. Let's give the person out there something to live for. If we can give a neighbor, a friend, a worker, just something to live for, that's meaningful in his life or her life. And it may be that we are over the 50 million and we can't save all, but let's save the one that's closest to us. I hope that has helped.
Thank you so much. Last question, I think, for tonight. You've obviously had sort of a longer view in terms of what has happened in South Africa in the last couple of decades. I think for many of us, some of us grew up after apartheid fell. I mean, I remember I was a high school boy when the first election was held. So it's hard to imagine what went before then. We hear the stories, we're aware of the complexities of then, but we weren't there. When you're looking at what's currently happening in South Africa and the tensions that is around in South Africa, how does that compare? How does that compare to what happened before 1994 and even earlier than that in the 80s? Is it a case that we tend to be running around the same circle here? But I guess that's a fear. Or is it the case that it might be even getting worse? What is your feel and your take on that? And how can we, and I think you've said many things about that already, but is there anything we can do to de-escalate things and make things better in that sense on a personal level?
I think one of the things that got to be raised is hope. Hope has diminished, and by some, hope has disappeared. If you talk pre-94, was it 94? Yeah. Or at least say about 4 years before that, when Mandela came out of prison, there, hope was born. Much had to still be done, but hope was born that something is coming. We're not sure what is coming, but hope was born. I was there at the World Trade Center from the very first day when the negotiations began. We didn't know where we were going, but suddenly there was a kind of hope. People are talking to one another. There were fights. There were fights. I mean, it was bitter. Some walked out, and we actually were part of that team that were not inside, we outside. So if the one comes out, we grab him by the neck, not by the neck. Anyway, by the hand, and say, listen, man, come, go back in. And that's how we work with. That was part of our work. Get them in there, stay in there, stay in there, you know. And it took a few years. It took time. It was tough. But hope was born. I, for the first time, felt, you know, I'm going to be a human being, kind of. You know, and my children will now benefit. I may be already, you know, a few years old, but my children will benefit. They will not go through what I go through. We got to, one of the first things I believe that needs to be done is to create an atmosphere of hope for the people that now feel hopeless. And the last few year or two, it's grown worse. The hope is diminished. And if we can do something just to make people feel it's not the end, we can do it. We got to erase that. And when we try to counsel and help people, is try to get them to feel confidence. Now, if somebody was without hope, I was, you know. I was without hope. And hope is not my neighbor's girlfriend. Hope is, you know, it's something that I never knew. I didn't think there'll ever be hope for me. But we rose and then we gave hope. But in many cases it was a false hope. Not all intentionally, but as time went on, there were masses that felt that, and they even saying it, well, 94, that was good, but didn't happen, nothing happened for me. I'm no easier. I've had nothing yet. Oh yes, much has happened. But there's also people that that has not tasted it yet. What we need to work on is give people the vision, to give people the hope that they can taste it. That they can taste it. It can happen. And if we get that, I can, we can, we must. I believe that our situation is not worse than it was. Some people in some areas feel it has. Why? Because it is in the papers and it's all over and we see it in the streets. And before apartheid was gone, or officially gone, we felt it wasn't there. There was. The only thing is it was underground. You didn't know about my anger, my bitterness. And yet I was a polite young man, greeting people very nicely. But inside here, if you leave there, I would say footsack or something. Or an uglier word. That is it. Before apartheid had gone, there were the bitternesses. Some were working outside the country. Others were working in the country underground. And it seemed as if we had a piece of everything. We did not. It was just undercover. That's all it was. And if you gave the opposition who were not in parliament all the ammunition, we would have had war. But they didn't have all the ammunition. And they were still fighting to still have it peacefully. And I remember the day that on the one side the roof mayor came in, and on the other side came, is the deputy mayor now, Cyril came from the enemies, the one roof mayor, National Party, and the other one is the ANC terrorists from across the border. And they came into that room as enemies. I can tell you, it wasn't 3, could be 3, maybe 4, 5 months. They were playing pool together there, the two. They got to know one another. And it gave a foundation for the talks. The real people that were working there was the Roofs and the Cyrils. Of course, they had all of the others there. And we got through it. And I believe if we can once again give that which we got in those years where, okay, we haven't got it yet, but there's hope. And something is stirring to happen. And that's what's needed. Some things must be turned around. Right now, there are people without any belief, without any hope, without think. If you talk to them and say, no, it will never happen. The negativity is there. That's what needs to be changed. And if we can change that, now you say, you know, I can't be like some of them calling people together on the town. No. Start with a neighbor. Start with the people in the street. Start with friends that you have at home. And create a sense of hope by people that are living hope. hopelessly today. They're not hopeless. They're living in a kind of a place where they feel hopeless. And we need to create hope again. We have within our family there a number of, not a number, it sounds very big, but a few people working for us in different, they gardeners, they this, they that, working there for I used to have a family, I now have a tribe, the tribe of Lodewyk. So for the tribe, there are others working there, and we try to give those people that are working for us, we try to give them hope. And if we can give them hope, and each one in their own corner can create hope to our students, to our people, let them know there is a chance. We can make it. And let that confidence come back where we say, yes, we can.